Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
No, so he's actually taking me back 2.5 decades, right? Don't have to guess my age, but yeah, two and a half decades is a long time, and I was young, bright. I'm still bright, isn't it? Not so young, but yeah, young, bright, straight out of engineering school, as they say, and yeah, that's how the journey started when I first met with Dr. Pandey. Well, I came here thinking there are a few things that I thought would be interesting for all of you to hear from me, but obviously a little bit of a tangent because it'll take me a couple of minutes to actually recalibrate, reset, because this whole thing about A, meeting him, and B, meeting dear friends like Deepak and coming back to where we all started from is a little bit overwhelming at times, but I'll just quickly try and give you my perspectives of what I think life is all about at B school and thereafter beyond B school. My first real start point will be that we've actually had 2 rounds of applause, but why don't we give ourselves, all of you, why don't you all give yourselves a big round of applause purely in gratitude for being where you really wanted to be, to do an MBA and to start an MBA course. So guys, a big round of applause for us. So I think that's the most important aspect. The first thing is to always stay in gratitude, be happy. If I was to just take a round of hands here and ask people, is there anybody who doesn't want to have a better tomorrow? Is there anybody whose hands will go up? No? No one wants his tomorrow to be less effective, less better than today? So you all want a better tomorrow, isn't it? Excellent. So what better way to start by saying that, we're going to use the next couple of months, quarters, weeks, whatever we have in terms of trying to do what we all want to do, which is to keep getting better and better. And I think, to me, fundamentally, that's what this course should be all about. This is what your stay here should be all about. It should be all about learning and reinventing yourselves and relearning and starting it all over again whenever the time will come. And I say this because if I go back 25 years and I go back to the time when I first stayed out of engineering, a lot of bunk, came into the B school, and I was doing a part-time MBA. Yeah? So Deepak was doing full-time, I was doing a part-time MBA, working during the day in my small family consulting business which my dad had just started. Like typical middle class, you finish your engineering, follow your father, you come and join the family business and you make a start. Year down is when I realized that life is probably my calling is something else and I need to do something different. And I started to venture out and I enrolled myself in a part-time MBA because my value system even then was that I'm not going to leave my dad in the lurch, keep helping him, and I'm going to go and work myself in the evening. And I landed up in a B school doing the evening shift. And it wasn't really the graveyard shift as they call it, but it was still not so easy, working your days and coming in the evening and trying to make something out of it. And that's when I met for the first time in '94 Dr. Pandey, and he's been a wonderful mentor. He's spoken about a bit, but his influence has been phenomenal. So don't take it as cliche if I tell you that one of the first expectations I'll probably have from all of you at B school is to respect the ecosystem. Respect the ecosystem, respect the process, respect your teachers, respect the learning, because if you think you know it all, you shouldn't be here. And when I say you shouldn't be here, I mean you shouldn't be on earth, because at the end of the day you'll keep learning and learning till the time you're going to depart from here. So I think that's fundamental to me to really get the clock straight. We have a lot of attitude at times, and we see a lot of punk, and I see that all the time when I go hiring and I go to B schools to interact and meet, and I see this, sometimes this whole thing of having arrived in life, and I always ask myself, what have you really done to think that you've arrived in life? Even when I was in Warden and I used to see people around, Is then getting to Warden arrival in life? I don't know. Life is much beyond 25, 30 years of having reached a Warden or a Harvard or whatever your dream institution is going to be. So what is life all about? The life is all about, in my opinion, is about learning. And your continued desire to learn, because look at the world outside. It's so dynamic. I mean, I was hearing, I thought it's a 2-year course, but Professor Patra told me like 14 months, 16 months, and you'll be out from here. I mean, imagine in 14 months, 16 months, or 18 months, or whatever is the right amount of time that you spend here, you think the world outside is static, or do you think the world is moving? And the pace at which the world is moving is phenomenal. Now, if you are going to remain static, are you going to cut ice? The answer is probably no. Now, and that's a realization that should dawn on you much faster than anybody coming here and telling you. So I think to me, the most important aspect really then about the next few months for you is, and thereafter, is to have this constant desire to learn. Now, since we are on the topic of B schools, because we hire from a few B schools and I generally like to go and interact with the batch before the team goes in for hiring, just for my own comfort, because having started this company 11 years ago when Del Monte was just a small joint venture between Sunil and Bharati Mittals, Bharati Enterprises and Del Monte Pacific, and me being the first employee, it's always been a passion to actually build a team which resonates the values that one has. So I generally go around to B schools and interact with students more for my own understanding, more for my own interaction and engagement than anything else. And whether it's my interaction with students or with the faculty, I always get, and the most recent happened in a very interesting manner, and I'll probably relate to that more than anything else. A couple of months back, I think it was January, Professor Jagdish Seth, he's one of the renowned professors. He was in India and everybody was celebrating him being here. And I was invited to a panel discussion at MICA, which is the Mudra Institute in Ahmedabad. And on the panel discussion, when we were closing, Professor Seth asked that, is there anything that you would like to ask of the audience or of the students or from your experience, so what is it that you would like to give as a message purely for the students? So you had this panel discussions about industry, about trends, etc. But is there anything specific that you want to talk about to the students? And I remember I almost instinctively had two things to say. The first one was that I fear intellectual arrogance. A lot of students, and especially, and this comes from pedigree of having reached, and then maybe that comes from the fact that you've arrived in life and you're better than, and you are better than a lot of people who don't have an MBA to start with, and you have an MBA, and then as you move along, you get this whole thing about I'm being brighter, smarter than the next guy around now. So this intellectual arrogance is something that is very frightening, and it comes in different hues. And I'm not a big fan of arrogance, right? There's a thin line that differentiates pride, when we take a lot of pride in what we do, and I'm all for it. I wear my pride on my sleeve, and I'm a very proud guy. But arrogance is not a virtue that I would recommend. And if I just stay with the fact that what is intellectual arrogance? Now, intellectual arrogance is something that tells you that intellectually you arrived in life, which means your learning stops, which means that you know everything. So you're going to look at whether it's your next boss, your next hiring manager, your next customer, your next vendor, or even in the classroom, you'll say, I know this all, and maybe you know a bit of it. I can challenge you with my 2 pennies that you probably don't even know the 2 bit. But you may feel you know it, which then means that at the end of the day, you are not going to learn. Now that's the first part of arrogance. The second part of arrogance is the execution of the damn thing. Now when this arrogance actually gets executed, now for example, how many of you, and with a raise of hands, how many of you want to be leaders? That took some time going up. Oh, everybody wants to be leaders, right? Now, and probably, because you're doing an MBA, you'll be put into a position of strength. Whether, you make that into leadership, I don't know. I would only wish you do, and I hope and pray that you do. But what is leadership, guys? We all say this, and I'm repeating what I tell to everybody back in the organization and outside, but it's equally relevant when you're starting life. And it is an extension of this arrogance bit, which is to say that if you understand and if you aspire to be good leaders, then the necessary condition to be a leader is to have followers. Right? The necessary condition to be a leader is to have followers. But the objective of leadership is not to create followers. The objective of leadership is to create more leaders. Now, how are you going to create more leaders if you are arrogant and are unable to engage? Now, arrogance is of two kinds. One is the intellectual, the other is the demeanor. And both hurt here. The first one is the intellectual part, where you're going to speak in a language that your followers are not going to understand. And if you're not going to understand what the leader is saying, what is the use of your intellect? If your intellect at the end of the day is for your own understanding, and I can assure you that your understanding will be the most complex articulation of that than anything else, it serves no purpose, except for maybe a badge to show that you probably are from a B school. But apart from that, it does nothing. So this whole thing has to be brought down to a level of simplicity. Now, the most complex of problems actually get treated by algorithms, which are steps of very simplified logics. And this is exactly what the language of any intellectual has to be. Because if you are going to be leaders and have the ability or are going to endeavor to create more leaders, which means create more sustainable value for all your colleagues, then you must teach them how to fish rather than feed them a fish. And the difference is that when you will teach them how to fish, is you're going to speak in a language which they are going to understand. And that's the fundamental thing. Now, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this for two purposes. One, guard yourself from this arrogance so that you will learn. Second, try and keep things simple. You know, business, and this is something that goes back to me for many, many years. And I was the first time it hit me on the head when my professor at IIM Calcutta used this, and he said that, you know what, business is common sense. And I reacted by saying yes, and common sense is uncommon these days. Now here is the fundamental thing. Imagine any business which is complex to understand is not a good business, and I can tell you in writing. Whatever may be the venture capital behind it, whatever may be the PE money behind it, any business that takes more than a minute to understand is the bad business model. Which means that fundamentally, what you will learn over the next 2 years should be the ability to distill everything into simple logical truth. So till such time, your logical state of mind doesn't tell you that you understood the relationship between currency and interest rates and vice versa. Keep at it. Keep at it to understand, because you might think that I'm not going into international business, or I'm not going into banking, I'm not going to finance, why the hell am I going to bother about currency and interest rate? But I can tell you that it's fundamental, because where all of these dots will get connected in business, you don't know. So I think to me the most important thing about business and the learning that you will have here is to try and keep things simple. And the only way you'll be able to do this if you respect the process, if you respect the ecosystem, if you respect your learning that you're going to get here, and obviously if you respect your relationships and create relationships that we so fondly have just talked about. And I can tell you these relationships remind me of something that I've shared many a times. I was a very good student, right? Just for modesty, I'm repeating it. I was a very good student, you know, and I did this part-time MBA, which was a three-year part-time, 6 semesters. And I taught all semesters and almost all subjects. The only subject that I didn't top in was taught by my wonderful professor, Dr. D.N. Pandit. So that's something I can tell you, and I cherish the relationship with him than I cherish with anybody else. So you can go back to understanding the role that teachers play, the roles that mentors play, and that's phenomenal in life. So I think coming back to the second part of what I was saying, so first is intellectual arrogance, right? If you take this on a spectrum, exactly on the other side of the spectrum is the polarity, where I bring a lot of talented young people who I worry will have intellectual arrogance. But then when it comes to crunch time, when it comes to actually delivering, they don't back themselves up. Now, what is the use of doing all the net practice if when it will come to match time, you are afraid to hit the ball? Now, here is what is fundamental to anything that you will aspire to do in life, and that is to have loads and loads of self-belief. And again, very different from arrogance. You know, look, I'm a big self-acclaimed fan of Virat Kohli, and I love the swagger. The only reason I love the swagger, and I would like to tell people that it's not arrogance, is the self-belief that the man carries. And it's not about the self-belief, it's about what has gone behind the making of a Virat Kohli. And I think that's what is unique to me. You know, I will share something very interesting with you. And this I saw it up front first time. My factory is in Bangalore, okay? And Virat plays for Bangalore. The hotel that I stay is where he stays during the IPL. Very good. So one day, and the only problem is that in the evenings when you get back from work, they're obviously not there, and during the day you're at work, so even if they're there, you don't see them. So cut the long story short, I never saw him, right? Now that's a pity, yeah, you do want to see him and say, well done, dude, but I did meet my other idol, which is Rahul Dravid, but yeah, Virat, I'm still to do that. So anyway, so I generally wake up in the morning and I go for my run, and I was in the gym and I was talking to and he said, you know what, that area we just reserved for RCB. I said, what do you mean, 1 year, so I can go and, yeah. So I said, okay, I'm not going to go, that's hallowed space. I mean, I stay here much more than he does. He comes only in the IPL match, I said, hallowed space, so let me feel like a celebrity Virat Kohli. I said, so what does he do different? And he says, you know what, we were like shocked. Then वो पहले तो treadmill में भागता है. Treadmill में भागने के बाद he wears a ski mask. You know what is a ski mask? It restricts the oxygen that will go in. So that's to create more endurance. Then they say कि 3 बजे बस निकलती है मैच खेलने के लिए जो 4 बजे का होता है. This guy comes at 2:30 and does powerlifting. Now, why would you need, you are Virat Kohli, right? I mean, you're like, nahi run banayega to bhi chalega, girls are still going to scream, right? And at the end of the day, guys like us will always swoon that, what a man, etc., etc. And I hope he brings the cup back home. But why do you need to put in that effort? But you look at him, look at the effort. What we see is the outcome. We see this huge celebrity status of the man. What we don't see is what's gone inside. And here is the second part of what I'm saying. To me, what you can influence, guys, is the input. What you cannot influence, but unfortunately are going to run after, is the output. The next career high, the next big job, the next big money, the next big car. Those are outcomes. Outcomes of certain inputs and a certain process. You take the inputs out, you remove the process, and what you will get on the outside, which is the outcome, is not going to be a sustainable one that is going to add any value in life. And I think to me, that is what you guys will need to inculcate. And if you are able to inculcate that, so what's in your influence? What is the input? The input is really intent and effort. I've always been on record, and I've said this multiple times within the company, outside, in multiple interviews to the organization. I have, to this day, never, ever evaluated any of my colleagues on outcome. You may think the outcome is in your hand, but unfortunately the outcome is in his hand, and you better leave it to him to do his job. What's in your hand is really the inputs and the process. So what I worry about, what I will have sleepless nights is, have you put in that intent, have you put in that effort, and have you done the how right? To me, the what of business, the why of business is secondary. The how of business is what makes the business sustainable. And why I say this is fundamentally because at the end of the day, whenever I talk to a lot of people, and especially young minds, and I'm still searching for my favorite answer, and I said, guys, why should we hire you, and what do you have in it, and what do you want to do? And everybody comes back almost resonating. We want to be good professionals. I've never heard anybody say, I want to be a good human being, and I can challenge you and say that be a good human being, and you'll make a great professional as a subset, and that's a given. Now, what does it mean to be a good human being at the end of the day? It basically means that you will have a certain value system. Now, we talk about integrity and financial discipline and fiduciary responsibilities in the corporate world. And whenever we talk about integrity, it comes with this whole thing about ethicality around financial matters and sobriety and so on and so forth. But I think to me, integrity is much more deeper. When no one's watching you, are you giving yourself that 8 hours of work that you promised that you're going to do? Are you true to yourself? Are you making that honest effort? So the intent and the effort and the honest inputs that you can give to yourself will aid you in the long term. And I think to me that is something that is very, very clear. The fact of the matter that all of this is still going to take you to the outside world, and you're going to have, face business decisions and look at different business models. The only thing that I can tell you is that try and keep things simple. A lot of you, I'm told, are marketing students here, and marketing is not jargon. A lot of us would like to believe marketing is jargon, but I can tell you marketing is the most commonsensical stream that you can ever choose. So keep things simple. One of the most fundamental definitions of management actually does not come from management books, but it will aid you well if I tell you that watch a little bit more Bollywood movies and try to be a little bit more articulative of what they're saying, because in Bollywood you will see some of the most fundamental, because at the end of the day management is all about observation. We observe organizations where people work, business models evolve, and obviously there's the science behind with the financial modeling and so on and so forth, but the fundamental thing that remains is common sense. Now, you have to distill the complex to simple, like I've said, but if you are able to do that, which means that you are able to drive your mind, and I'm sure all the intellectual property that is sitting in this room, which is your professors, will help you do that, and they'll love to answer your questions. But remember, that circle of logic must always close in your mind for you to remember and understand anything that you're going to do. And just to give you a sense, have you seen 3 Idiots? Yes. And our friend loves to give demos, right? So I'm going to give you a demo to show you how fundamentally Bollywood is a great example, and how easy or simple is management and business. You will hear, is there any marketing professors, and I'm not going to belittle this here, but I'm going to give you a small, and not small, I'll probably give you the most fundamental definition of branding. And it comes from an Amitabh movie called Sarkar. Have you seen that? So in Sarkar, they are plotting to kill Amitabh Bachchan, and there's a Swami who's sitting there plotting, and he says, you know what? There's a difference in killing Sarkar and Subhash Nagre. Subhash Nagre एक इंसान और सरकार एक सोच. And that's what branding is all about. Now, tell me guys, you've seen this movie multiple number of times. Are you going to forget this definition in a hurry? And that's what business is all about. It's absolutely commonsensical. If you think you will be able to sell sand in Sahara, you obviously won't. But if you try and sell a bottle of mineral water, you will. And that's why Bisleri does the camel ad in Jaipuria or Bika or wherever it is. Now the thing is that we've all kept this so complex because at the end of the day, we want to show the world that we know something more. But the most brilliant of decisions, the most brilliant of business models, the most brilliant of advertising, marketing, anything that you talk about will be something which is simple to understand, because at the end of the day, you are the consumer, right? You are the one who's going to consume whatever I'm saying. And that's what this is all about. To cut the whole thing short, or to close what I have been saying in terms of what I would expect, the other thing that is going to hit you guys is that all of this is good. So you're going to be great with learning. You will guard yourself with intellectual arrogance. You will try and back yourself, because self-belief is very important. And I didn't complete that, but let me just explain the self-belief part a little bit more. Imagine yourself being selected for a job. All of you aspire to be selected for a great job, isn't it? Imagine you've been selected for a job, and there's a job that you need to, a task that you need to accomplish, and you decide not to be able to back yourself. What do you think your supervisor, your boss, your manager is going to think? First, what will you think? Are you in that position by default, which means somebody just dropped you there? Or are you there by design? That somebody actually hired you for whatever they saw in you. So you're there by design, right? Somebody hired you because they saw what they saw in you, and so on and so forth. And then if you decide not to back yourself, if I had done the hiring, I'll probably say that, guys, if I have brought you here by design because I believe in what you showed to me during your academics and so on and so forth, and now when it comes to crunch time, you're not going to back yourself, I rather would do this thing myself, right? So I think if you really want to move on, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learning is all about not fearing the unknown, not fearing making mistakes. And there's plenty of mistakes that we all have made. You know, Dr. Pandey talked about a number of things which were brilliant about whatever he said in my introduction. But what he did not tell you was that the startup that I joined straight out of leaving my father's organization gave me a wonderful kick in terms of experience. But at a time when I needed it the most, and I went through one of my most terrifying experiences, having suddenly lost my only brother in a car accident, and at the same time the company that I was working for went bankrupt, and I was on the road. So he talked about knowing me, knowing about Anubha, and she was my girlfriend at that time, and I was in MBA doing my assignments, and that's how he knows her. But so we had to start from ground zero, and he's forgotten, but I haven't. The guy who actually sent me back to academics to really find the balance again and actually told me to go to IIM Calcutta for a year was the man himself sitting here. And that's how the journey started all over again. So that brings me to the only thing that I value in people much more than everything else. I mean, obviously, I value the fact that I need people to be a good human beings, but one of the virtues within that I would tremendously, and that's something that you will have to build, and I hope it doesn't come to you the hard way, is to have some resilience. I was just reading the newspaper while driving here. On the front page it says India plays 4 games in 10 days, test of resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is all about the fact that you get up every time you fall. Now it's foolhardy, and I can tell you this from experience. A lot of people again see that done reasonably well. We started Del Monte from scratch. It's one of the fastest growing F&B brands. It's one of the most valuable brands in the country currently, and all in the most mature markets like FMCG, all in 10 years, etc., etc. Yes, but what we don't know and realize is I had a lot more hair. When I started this in 2008, and incidentally, me and Deepak also enrolled in doing a PhD. I went the Del Monte way, he went the PhD way. His PhD, I'm not a doctor, but I'm a physician still telling you guys that life is going to be tough, right? So while I lost all my hair, I also can tell you that when you are at work, you die more in a day than you live. And whenever you die, how do you pull yourself up? You have to find the smallest of things that is going to give you positivity to bring yourself back up, and then hope that you have enough energy to take on the problems that are staring at you. And then the beauty of it is you don't take all the problems together because they will subsume you, but you take them one by one and you handle them. But the fact of the matter is you need to show resilience. Because when you're going to go out, life will happen. We can talk about all the optimism, all the positivity sitting here, but when you're going to step out of this room, when you're going to step out into the big bad world, or even while you're here at work, life will unravel, life will happen, and there will be days when you will be down, and that's the time you need to pick yourself up. And that's where I'm reminded, and I keep repeating this to a lot of my colleagues back in the office. There's this beautiful couplet from Javed Akhtar, and I love these Bollywood things because that's the best way to get people to relate. It's either Virat Kohli or it's the Bollywood. And this one goes like this. It says, "Dil aakhir to kyun rota hai?" Isn't it? दुनिया में यूं ही होता है, ये जो गहरे सन्नाटे हैं, वक्त ने सबको ही बांटे हैं। थोड़ा गम है सबका किस्सा, थोड़ी धूप है सबका हिस्सा, आंख तेरी बेकार ही नम है, हर पल एक नया मौसम है, क्यों तू ये पल खोता है, दिल आखिर तू क्यों रोता है। That's what Javed Akhtar. I say this because I absolutely love it, and I love it for two reasons. One, in this whole thing about crying wolf, in this whole thing about crying about spilled milk, we miss the moment that we're living in. And anybody will tell you, if you want to be, and there is huge spiritual drive that started now in this world, where people are talking about spirituality and mixing it with management, and leaders are talking about increased levels of spirituality, and people are doing meditation and so on and so forth. But to cut the long story short, the gist of it is what? It's all about living in the moment. Now, it's all about mindfulness, or it's about heightened awareness. How many of you actually are mindfully here? I don't know. I hope you are, because if you are, you'll take back something. I hope that will help you in the days to maybe navigate yourself. But imagine, I've been here 45 minutes and I'm speaking with you and sharing with you what I think has been my experience. If it goes back with you in any form or manner that is useful, will be a value well served. And that's the fundamental thing about what leaders need to do. They need to create sustainable values in every moment of engagement. And that's what we all need to do, make every moment count, which means that don't live in the past. Don't cry over spilled milk. Don't let your heart cry. This too shall pass, and tomorrow is a beautiful day. So guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me here. I wish you all the very best. And Dr. Pandey, I can never thank you enough for everything that you've done for me and Anubhav. So thank you very much, and go well, and God bless. Thanks.
Sharing your success mantra with us. Be a good human being, then become a good professional. Make things simple, be resilient, have self-belief, right? And be positive, right? So that is all we have to learn to become better human beings. Now we'll start with some protocol, sir. So I would like to invite our director, sir, to present a green certificate and a memento to our chief guest as a token of appreciation. This green certificate is a initiative which is driven by sir, where we have replaced a bouquet with a green certificate, and this green certificate ensures that a tree is planted in the name of the chief guest at Trees for Elephants, Jharkhand. Right? So whenever sir is given there, right? And a memento. Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. Pratibha Basan, Dean Academics, to deliver a vote of thanks.